Your BMW could be hiding up to 15 horsepower, and most owners never realize it. After 2 decades in motorcycle workshops, I've watched riders spend thousands fixing problems that sometimes take just minutes to solve. Today, I'm revealing 17 hidden BMW motorrad tricks dealers rarely mention, including a simple €4 fix that helped my R1200 GS surpass 190,000 kilometers on its original engine. Let's get started. Number 17. The ABS and service reset the dealer charges €120 to press a button for. When your BMW throws a service due reminder or an ABS or ASC light after a battery change, the dealer plugs in the GS911 or ISTA and clears it. That's it. That's the whole job. On most K&R platforms, you can do the service counter reset yourself. Ignition on, don't start, hold the trip reset button, cycle the ignition while holding, and the service interval clears. For ABS residual faults after a battery disconnect, ride above 5 kilometers per hour so the wheel speed sensors resync and the light drops on its own. The dealer knows this. They bill you anyway. It is the same procedure, you are just not paying €120 to watch them do it. But a cleared warning light means nothing if the brain reading your throttle is still running on stale data. Now things start to change. Number 16. The throttle body sync that transforms how a boxer twin idles. Every twin-cylinder BMW, the R-Series boxers, the F-twins, relies on both throttle bodies pulling identical vacuum. Over 20,000 kilometers, they drift apart, and that's the real reason your boxer surges at 4,000 RPM, hunts at idle, and buzzes through the bars. Dealers quote €150 for a throttle body sync. You do it with 2 vacuum gauges or a €30 twin manometer. Warm the engine, connect a gauge to each intake port, and adjust the balance screw until both needles sit level. On a bike with the throttle cable and the electronic bodies, sync the mechanical side first. A rider brought me a surging R1250 GS, convinced it needed a fuel pump. 10 minutes on the manometer, and it pulled clean from idle to redline. The buzz in the bars vanished. It's the single most felt improvement on a boxer, and it costs you nothing but time. Balanced intakes are wasted though. If your bike is choking on the carbon, its own crankcase feeds back into it. And then this happens. Number 15. The intake and valve carbon clean, BMW pretends isn't necessary. Pull the airbox on any BMW past 40,000 kilometers and look at the intake tract. That black lacquer is oil vapor baked onto the runners and the back of the valves. On the Boxers and the S1004s, it strangles airflow and kills throttle crispness. The dealer's answer is a €300 plus induction service. Yours is a can of intake cleaner and a warm engine. Spray in controlled bursts while holding around 2,500 revolutions per minute. Let it stumble and smoke, then take it up the road hard to blow the residue clear. On direct injection, BMWs, the valve backs don't get washed by fuel. So this matters more, not less. A soot-fouled F900 that hesitated off idle came back crisp enough that the owner asked what I'd remapped. I hadn't touched the map. A clean intake is only half the equation, because the part quietly ending BMW final drives isn't in the engine at all. Now, watch what happens next. Number 14. The final drive oil change. BMW calls lifetime. Shaft drive BMWs run a bevel gear in the rear final drive, and BMW lists that oil as fill for life. Life means until the warranty ends. I've split open final drives at 90,000 kilometers, where the oil had turned to gray metallic paste, and the crown wheel bearing was already howling. A €1,600 unit. The trick costs €15. There's a fill plug and a drain plug on the drive housing. Drain the old oil, refill with the correct hypoid gear oil to specification. Every 40,000 kilometers. 10 minutes, 2 plugs, a syringe. Do it 3 times over the life of the bike, and you'll never meet the failure. BMW's lifetime schedule is quietly engineering. The rider on that howling drive paid for a rebuild. The next one won't. Fresh gear oil protects the drive, but it can't save a gearbox that's shifting through fluid a decade old. And the next entry proves the point perfectly. Number 13. The The gearbox and clutch fluid refresh nobody's schedules. Same story, one component forward. The transmission oil on many BMWs and the hydraulic clutch fluid on the R and K bikes sits far longer than it should because the service book barely mentions it. Old gearbox oil is why your boxer clunks into first and balks on the 2 to 3 change. Old clutch fluid absorbs moisture, drops the bite point, and cooks the slave cylinder. Drain and refill the gearbox with the correct specification oil and flush the clutch line with fresh D.4 until it runs clear. A Nachi gearbox R1200 RT that 2 riders had written off as worn selectors shifted like new after a €20 oil change. The gearbox was never worn. The oil was just finished. Clean fluids move the power, but the spark lighting it is where BMW hides real, free performance. And this next one explains why. Number 12, the spark plug and coil stick service that restores a misfiring 4. On the S1000RR and S1000XR4s, the coil-on plug sticks live down in the head, get heat-soaked, and start breaking down long before the plugs look worn. The symptom is a high RPM stumble. Everyone blames on fuel. Pull each stick, check the boot for cracking and carbon tracking, and gap check the plugs to BMW spec. Not tighter, not looser, exactly to spec, because these engines are knock sensitive and guessing costs you. Dielectric grease on the boots stops the next round of tracking. A rider chasing a top-end miss for months, with a new fuel pump and a new filter and nothing else fixed, had one hairline cracked coil boot. €40 and the miss was gone. The dealer wanted to start with injectors. Perfect spark is pointless if the sensor telling the ECU how much air came in is lying to it. And that leads us directly to the next example. Number 11, the MAF and intake air sensor clean that fixes phantom faults. The air and pressure sensors feeding your BMW's ECU get coated in fine film and start under reading, so the bike runs rich, fouls plugs, and throws intermittent fueling faults that no dealer scan can pin down. The fix is not a new sensor. Unplug it. Spray it with proper sensor cleaner. Never use brake clean or contact cleaner. Those destroy the element. Let it dry fully. Reinstall. A GS that had been to the dealer twice for a wandering fuel fault and a €190 sensor quote was cured with a €9 can and 10 minutes. Every good tech does this before recommending the part, then bills you for the part. A truthful sensor still can't help you if the fuel arriving at the injectors is already restricted. And this is where things get fascinating. Number 10. The fuel filter, buried in the tank that BMW never wants touched. Many BMWs hide the fuel filter inside the tank as part of the pump assembly, sealed, lifetime, and a nightmare to reach. As it clogs, you get a high RPM stumble under load, a hesitation on a hard throttle roll-on, exactly the symptoms riders blame on bad fuel or a tired pump. 2 ways to beat it. On bikes where the filter is a separate serviceable element inside the pump plate, replace just the filter for €25. Instead of the €400 pump assembly the dealer pushes. On older lines, some riders fit an inline filter you can actually see and swap in 5 minutes. Either way, you stop feeding fine-tolerance injectors through a filter BMW designed to be ignored until it kills the pump. Clean fuel supply is one thing. The injectors spraying it are a different fight entirely. And that brings us to the next discovery. Number 9. The injector clean that dealers do with a €400 machine and you do in the tank properly. Injector tips varnish over and the spray pattern collapses from a fine mist to a dribble, giving you uneven idle cold start hesitation and creeping fuel use. The dealer's induction machine is genuinely effective and genuinely overpriced. For most riders, a concentrated PEA-based injector cleaner run through a low tank, followed by a proper high RPM motorway blast to get heat and flow through the injectors, restores the pattern without pulling a thing. A twitchy idling F800 smoothed out over 2 treated tanks. The key is PEA chemistry and heat, because the cheap ethanol-based bottles just wash the tank and do nothing at the tip. Even flawless fueling is wasted if the cooling and thermostat system is cooking your BMW slowly. Now we step into the next chapter of the list. Number 8. The cooling system and thermostat trick that saves liquid-cooled BMWs. The liquid-cooled Boxers, the K-Bikes, and the S1004s run coolant that BMW leaves in far too long, and a lazy thermostat that half opens is why your bike runs hot in traffic and the fan screams on every warm day. Flush and refill with the correct BMW spec coolant every 4 years. And if the temperature climbs abnormally in stop-start riding, suspect a €25 thermostat before you ever entertain the €900 the dealer will float toward a water pump. A Case 600 that spiked its temperature on every commute was fixed with a thermostat and a fresh flush. Overheating quietly ages every seal and gasket on the bike. Beating it is worth more than any horsepower trick here. Managing heat protects the engine, but the ECU deciding your fuel and timing is still the biggest untapped lever on the whole bike. Now we arrive at one of the most interesting examples. Number 7. The ECU adaptation reset that gives you back the bike you bought. Your BMW's ECU learns fuel trims and throttle adaptation around your habits, and after years of gentle commuting, it has tuned itself lazy. Plus, it never fully relearns after a battery change or a sensor swap. Force a clean adaptation reset. Battery reconnected, ignition on for the full self-check without starting, then start and let it idle completely untouched. No throttle, no lights, no heated grips, until it settles and the fans have cycled. Do this after any service. The dealer calls it a reprogram and bills €150. It's a relearn cycle, and the throttle response and idle quality on the other side of it feel like a different bike. A recalibrated brain is only as good as the timing map it's working from. Next, we look at a brand that quietly changed the game.
Before we continue, everything in this video comes straight from Ride Longer, Spend Less, the complete motorcycle maintenance handbook. The full system, every step and every number we couldn't fit here. Scan the QR code on your screen to get your copy, and let's get back to it.
Number 6. The Premium Fuel Timing Advance. BMW tuned out for the worst petrol on earth. BMW ships conservative ignition maps, so the bike survives the lowest octane fuel in its worst market. On the knock sensor bikes, the 4s especially, you can hand that timing back. Run 2 or 3 full tanks of genuine high-octane fuel, then do the ECU adaptation reset from Trick 7. With consistent knock-free combustion, the ECU walks timing toward its real sweet spot, and you get sharper roll-on and cleaner mid-range without touching a single map or fitting a single part. It only works if you actually keep feeding it the good fuel, drop back to cheap petrol, and it retreats to protect itself. On a bike spec'd for higher octane, running the cheap stuff is leaving the timing advance you paid for locked in the box. Better timing needs to breathe out as freely as it breathes in, and that is where BMW strangles you for the regulators. But the next spot belongs to something even more interesting. Number 5. The exhaust flapper and decat truth on modern BMWs. Modern BMWs run an electronic exhaust flap valve that stays choked at low revolutions per minute for noise regulations, and a dense catalytic honeycomb that adds back pressure. Riders on track bikes unplug or override the flap servo so the exhaust flows freely across the whole range, and the mid-range wakes up immediately. The effect on an S1000 is night and day. I'll be straight. Removing catalytic material is illegal for road use under emissions regulations, and I'm not telling you to gut yours. But the flap override alone, and simply keeping the cat clear with proper high-temperature motorway running instead of only short cold commutes recovers flow, the factory buried for a noise certificate, not for your engine. Freeing the exhaust exposes the next thing BMW never mentions, the pressure building inside the crankcase itself. Coming in next is something many people overlook. Number 4. the crankcase breather catch can trick that keeps intakes clean for good. Your BMW's crankcase breather routes oil vapor straight back into the intake, which is exactly why Trick 15's carbon keeps coming back no matter how often you clean it. Fit a small inline oil separator, a catch can, in the breather hose, and it traps the oil mist before it ever reaches the intake. Cleaner valves, less carbon, steadier idle, permanently. The part costs a fraction of what the dealer calls an induction service package, and it stops the problem at the source instead of billing you to clean up after it every year. On a high-mileage Boxer, it's the difference between cleaning the intake once and cleaning it forever. Stopping oil vapor is a start, but the oil itself is where BMW's biggest quiet compromise lives. But the next example raises the stakes. Number 3. The oil grade and change interval trick that outlasts BMW's own schedule. BMW's headline service interval stretches oil far to make ownership look cheap, and the Boxers in particular run hot enough to punish tired oil, which is where the dreaded top-end tick and cam wear start. The trick is simple, and it is the cheapest insurance on the bike. Use the correct full synthetic spec BMW actually calls for, and halve the interval. If the book says change it late, change it early. A rattly high-mileage Boxer that had followed the dealer interval religiously went quiet and stayed quiet on fresh synthetic at half the mileage. You are not adding anything exotic, you are just refusing to run the oil to the edge of a schedule written to make servicing look inexpensive, not to make your engine last. Fresh oil protects the metal, but the electrical heart quietly killing more BMWs than any engine fault is next. But the next one proves the rule. Number 2. The battery, charging, and ground connection trick behind most mystery BMW faults. More BMWs get dragged to the dealer for random electronic gremlins, flickering dashboards, phantom ABS warnings, intermittent no-starts, cruise control faults, warning lights that disappear as quickly as they arrive, and sensor errors that seem impossible to trace, from one simple cause more than any other: a weak battery and corroded ground connections. BMW motorcycles are packed with sophisticated electronics that constantly communicate with one another, and every one of those systems depends on stable voltage. The problem is that a battery can still show over 12 volts sitting in the garage and appear perfectly healthy, yet collapse under the heavy load of starting the engine. The instant that voltage drops below what the control modules expect, the bike begins throwing fault codes that have nothing to do with the components being blamed. Riders end up convinced the ABS unit is failing, the ECU is dying, or a sensor has gone bad, when the real culprit is simply an electrical system that cannot maintain consistent voltage. Before replacing a single expensive part, have the battery properly load tested instead of relying on a basic voltage reading. If you store the bike over winter or only ride occasionally, keep it connected to a quality smart maintenance charger so the battery remains fully charged without being overcharged. Then spend a few minutes inspecting every major ground connection, especially the main earth strap attached to the engine case. Remove the bolts, clean away any corrosion, oxidation, or road grime. Apply a thin coat of dielectric grease or electrical contact protectant, and tighten everything securely. Those few minutes of preventative maintenance can eliminate countless mysterious electrical problems before they ever appear. I once saw a GS arrive at a workshop with what the owner had been told was an expensive ECU failure. The bike had already been quoted hundreds of euros for further diagnostics and possible module replacement. The entire issue turned out to be one filthy, corroded ground bolt that was preventing the electronics from getting a clean electrical path. After cleaning the connection, every warning light disappeared and the bike ran flawlessly. It's a story experienced BMW mechanics have seen countless times. 9 times out of 10, mysterious electronic faults are caused by poor voltage or bad grounding, not failed control modules. Yet replacing modules is far more profitable than cleaning electrical connections. Solid voltage keeps every electronic system on the motorcycle honest, but the single biggest lever affecting how your BMW actually performs, responds, and delivers its power is one setting almost every rider ignores: But the real turning point comes here. Number 1. The chassis and suspension trick that's worth more than any engine mod. Here it is, the €4 fix, and the reason my GS crossed 190,000 kilometers, feeling planted, predictable, and confidence-inspiring the whole way. Almost every BMW rider runs the wrong tire pressure and never bothers setting suspension sag, and that hurts the bike more than most electronic faults or dirty sensors ever will. Tires are the only part of your motorcycle touching the road, yet most riders simply inflate them to whatever number they remember and never think about it again. Cold set your tire pressures to the load you're actually carrying. Riding solo, traveling with luggage, and carrying a pillion all require different pressures. And BMW lists those recommendations for a reason. Just 2 or 3 psi too high or too low can make the bike feel vague in corners, increase braking distances, cause the tires to wear into a flat strip, and make the bike follow grooves and road imperfections instead of holding a clean line. Then move on to suspension. Set your rear preload so the bike settles to roughly 1/3 of its total suspension travel with you in full riding gear sitting on it. Too little preload leaves the rear squatting, slowing the steering and making the bike feel heavy. Too much preload makes the suspension harsh, reduces grip, and causes the bike to skip over bumps instead of absorbing them. If your BMW has ESA electronic suspension, don't leave it permanently set to the solo rider icon out of habit. Switch between the solo, luggage, or 2-up settings to match how you're actually riding that day. The system can only work properly if you tell it how much weight it's carrying. A simple tire pressure gauge costs around €4, and spending a few minutes checking pressures before a ride can completely change how the motorcycle behaves. I once watched a rider who was convinced his GS needed expensive fork work ride away grinning after nothing more than 15 minutes spent correcting tire pressures and setting suspension sag. The steering sharpened, the bike tracked straight, and the vague front-end feeling disappeared without replacing a single part. It's not an upgrade that adds horsepower or flashy accessories. It's something you'll notice in every corner, every brake application, and every kilometer you ride. And it's one of the few improvements a dealer rarely takes the time to dial in, simply because there's no expensive part to sell. If this gave you a fresh perspective, hit subscribe and stay connected.